morning I want to talk to you about how this first week of Advent's theme is called Summoning Audacious Hope. Summoning a bold hope in our lives, even when life seems to be found, when we seem to find darkness coming in all around us. So I want to start off with this question. Maybe I want to go back to first grade when I was living in Toronto, Canada, in a small little apartment. I'm this immigrant's son. Both parents are working on a latchkey kid. But one of the things I had waiting for me at home was television. And I would watch this TV show called, on PBS, the Canadian version of PBS called TVO, Hammy Hamster. Did any of you guys grow up watching Hammy Hamster? See, none of you have been deprived as children. But in the wholesome land of Canada up north, we had this show called Hammy Hamster. And Hammy would go through these, countrysides, and with his friend GP the guinea pig, and Maddie the rat, and they'd go on these adventures. And of course, I didn't have anyone at home. I was a single child, and so I would, pretend like I was a hamster and say, "Mom, hamsters are cute." And Mom, come back from work tired and probably didn't want to hear much from their little son. But the fact of the matter is, that she gave in. She gave in, and I had this book called Know Your Hamster. You guys ever remember? There was a thing called, before the internet, there was a thing called books. And little kids had these books, and I go to the library, and I have this thing called Know Your Hamster, and they have all these cute pictures of hamsters. I say, "Mom, this is what I want. I want a hamster." And so she got me a hamster, and so that's how it happened. But actually, I remember now, I asked, I didn't know if I was going to get it, so I prayed to Santa. And then I said, "Do you think Santa Claus will bring it to me?" And, Mom didn't have time to wait for Santa, so she just got me that hamster. So anyway. But I want to ask you, that was one of the best presents I ever got. And actually this week, Uni and I finally relented with Ari and Avi, and we got them a little hamster from Petco. So this whole week was kind of interesting how it all went together. But turn to the person next to you and tell them about the best Christmas present that you ever received. It's the best, or maybe one of the best. Don't lock up with the best. A Christmas present that really one of your favorites. Okay, so now you guys have a call some people out. So Joey Torres, what was your favorite Christmas present? What was your favorite Christmas present? Okay, hold on. Okay, people are going to speak now. Joey? Joey, what's your favorite Christmas present?
Actually, Grandma's got a great one.
Okay, Grandma, what was your favorite?
I don't know what happened, but I wanted a doll, and I think they forgot to give it to me, and so on Christmas. So the next day, somehow, they gave me, and I named her Marsha. And they said she was on the roof, so she got.
That's right. Santa's never late. Just gets there on time. Okay. Ward Palmer or Debbie, what's one of your favorite Christmas presents?
Oh, I got a red bicycle, two-wheeler when I was
Two red bicycle.
Ask Don Franklin.
Don, okay, there's a request. Don Franklin, what's the favorite Christmas present of yours? Can't remember.
Coming home to Christmas.
Coming home to Christmas. A specific one, or all
Now after a long stint on a carrier.
of them? On a carrier, okay. There you go. All right, well, thank you for sharing. But we are now in the season of Advent, and we are going to be unwrapping several presents that God has sent to us during the season of Advent as we prepare our hearts for the coming of Jesus Christ and Christmas. We remember Christ's first coming 2,000 years ago, but we also recognize that Christ's second coming is happening all around us, because Jesus Christ said, "When I send my Spirit, I send myself to you, and I go with you." So we're going to celebrate that. And these gifts are like hope, peace, joy, and love. So you're saying, why is Pastor Jake so excited? Because you can't get enough of these things in our life, don't want any more love in my life. That never happens. Give me a break. We all want more of that. And we give thanks for Jesus, that we are the people that have that connection with God, our Heavenly Father, through Jesus Christ in our hearts. We receive Jesus through our hearts these coming weeks. And so because God becomes one of us, and so we can see that God's blessing is for us here today, not some time in the afterlife, but that blessing starts today in this relationship. We are not alone, because we realize at the beginning of the season of Advent, because I'm sure that this is the first week of Advent, beginning of the year, the tradition is that we start in darkness. We start in the night, because this is the beginning. It's just, before it is dawn, before the sun has come up. And so we are longing for Emmanuel to come. We're longing for God. And it marks the beginning of the Christian New Year. And it's very interesting. This is the season where when we wake up, it is still dark in the morning. And then when we go home and we're commuting and running errands in the evening, it's dark. And so we're surrounded by a seasonal darkness. The winter is here, but then there's also this other winter that also can often come at the end of the year, which is often that season of doubt, of fear, of concern, of worry. These things can kind of have a confluence. They converge sometimes in December, and it's something that we always need to be aware of, that we are often surrounded by the darknesses of this world. And what we often find is that we are longing for some light, even a little bit of light, to get us through some of these dark times in this month of December. But God is lighting the way. And so I want to talk to you this morning, as I mentioned earlier, that God is preparing to light our lives, so we may shine a light during the season of Advent and the season of hope. And one of the things that we're going to be looking at in the coming weeks is that with Christmas coming, so this is kind of a preview of Christmas Eve, is that this is the season where more people are open to having spiritual conversations than any other time of the year, next to maybe Easter, but definitely around this time. And if they haven't been going to church or they haven't been in church for a long time, these weeks leading up to Christmas Eve, people become a little bit more open. They don't always know why, but maybe the holiday cups at Starbucks, I don't know, maybe they get these little cues. Maybe it might be the decorations in the neighborhood, but people begin longing for more. They begin longing for something spiritual in their lives to reconnect and pull them out of the darkness that they may be facing. And so the first thing that our passage today talks about is the fact that we are to be aware that oftentimes there are going to be forces of darkness in our lives. For the book of Isaiah, it was the season of being exiled into Babylon. They were happy, in Israel, but there are other forces in the world that came in, and God allowed this to happen. And quite frankly, they had to figure out, Lord, what are you doing by sending us into Babylon and living as slaves and as servants and as second-class foreigners in this world? Not an easy existence to be in. In Jesus' time, when the book of Mark was being written, Mark understood what were the people hearing, what were they needing to hear. Well, they didn't need to hear a fancy message. They were being persecuted on a day in and day out basis. So they needed a gospel, a short gospel that really encapsulates the meaning of Jesus, the power of Jesus, the power of the gospel. What is it that God did through Jesus Christ by God sending Jesus into the world to die for our sins and to be risen from the dead, that we can be a part of that resurrection? So we see that there is this thing that even in this darkness, even in the world that becomes difficult, we realize that there's this message of hope. But we also need to be aware, because just because you're a Christian doesn't mean everything is going to go nice and smooth. As I mentioned before I read the Mark passage, Christians were losing their jobs. The temple had been destroyed in Jerusalem, and there was mass persecution of Christians at that time. And people reading Mark's account would have said, we are living in the end times. This is not the beginning of something new. This is the end. And so that's why this message, this passage, would really resonate. I love how the book of Isaiah, in a similar situation where people were experiencing oppression and injustice, it declares, Lord, tear open the heavens, keep awake dark lights, stars falling, heaven shaking. Lord, let your face shine upon us. Have you ever just found yourself just feeling like you're in a vice and you say, God, I need to break loose. Everybody do this. Break loose. Break loose. That's right. This is the season of hope. And we are given the gospel so we can break loose and say, Lord, break me out of these depression. Break me out of the sadness. Break me out of this hopelessness and bring me into a state of hopefulness. This is a language of not complacency. Of saying, oh, let's wait for the Lord. I mean, there are times when we got to wait for the Lord, and we always need to wait for the Lord, right? But it's also a message of saying, Lord, I actively call on you. I actively ask for your help. I actively pray. I actively help people in my midst. I actively help my neighbor who was thrown in prison. I actively help the homeless person. I actively help someone at church who is sick. I actively help because I know that as we are actively living and loving and caring for one another, the darkness begins to dissipate. Amen? That's right. We are all in this together, my friends. You know, I was just thinking to ourselves that we live in some dark times. There are times when we hear about mass shootings and killings and school shootings. You know, I say, Lord, where is the justice? Where is the hope? Where is the light that you are going to bring some sanity into this world? Have you ever found yourself pulling your head, looking at the news and saying, oh, Lord, another shooting. Now this time in Thousand Oaks. I have been like that. I'm sure you have too. But that is mine. This is not new. In the times of Isaiah, in the times of the book of Mark, Christians and old people of the book, the Jewish people, they face similar situations, but they learn not to let the darkness just sit on their hearts, but they learn to say, Lord, show me a different perspective. Show me your heavenly perspective so we may see the broad possibilities of how you may be calling us into action. A church in action. A church that can do something. You know, there are so many cycles of hopelessness out there, and we have been called to shine a light to break that cycle, those cycles of hopelessness. You know, right now we're dealing with the refugee issue on the border. You know, I mean, it's complex. Yeah, I can see it. You know, as a sovereign nation, we want to protect our borders, and you know, and I get that those arguments, but I also have to ask ourselves that as people of faith, is there not a more nuanced or a more compassionate response that we could be praying for? Oh, you know, what is it? Maybe we could take a step back once again and say, Lord, help me to see not just the pictures on the internet of just, you know, of mothers and children being, you know, thrown pepper gas, but Lord, help me also see with a heart of compassion to see what is going on in the world. What is the history behind where these people are coming from? From Guatemala, from El Salvador, from these Central American nations. You know, did this suddenly happen that these people are living in such desperate poverty? Or is there a history that lasts for years and years, maybe even going all the way back to the conquistadors and back then, and the oppression and the suppression of the native people? You know, and some of this type of imperialistic thinking. I know I'm going a little wider and broader, but that's what we need to do. We're Presbyterians, we're thinkers. We go to school, we sometimes think too much and not enough with our hearts. So we need to say, Lord, okay, we're thinking too much. Ground me. Bring me back to action. Bring me back to my heart. Bring me back to a humanity that remembers that these are people, brothers and sisters in life, in this humanity that we have been called into this world. So we need to be called to keep alert. Because keep alert, because at any time, Jesus is coming back. Jesus is coming back. And it is in these moments that we need to be aware that God is working. You know, I was talking with a friend of mine who was doing some work with homeless women, and you know, one lady was just like, you know, just certifiable, if you know what I mean. Read between the lines. She had been living in prostitution, doing drugs, and all sorts of things. And so she wasn't an easy person to be around. But as part of their ministry of the church, they had a homeless ministry, and so this mother of two, you know, their kids are grown, and she, you know, they moved out, but she decided she wanted to, you know, put her faith into action, and so she got to befriend this lady, and sometimes she would get attacked, sometimes she would, you know, the lady would just smell really bad, all sorts of different things. But then one day, she had a moment of clarity that the lady was homeless, and she looked over at the lady who was trying to help and bring meals and so forth, and said, do you know, I look into your face, see that God had just brought a moment of sanity, a moment of clarity to the woman, to the homeless woman, and was able to minister back and say, do you see, I see in you, Jesus Christ. You see, for her, the lady who came to help, ended up seeing Jesus in the face of the lady who was homeless, that she came to help. And that lady looked at her and could see the face of Jesus. And so Jesus was coming. So we need to be aware that Jesus is coming all around us. Jesus is not just coming someday in the by and by, maybe another 2,000 years from now when we're flying around the universe in like a Star Trek movie. No, Jesus is here and coming, and constantly coming, and coming beside people who are living in oppression, living in injustice, and living in depression. Jesus is here and looking to help. You know, Jesus is coming. Christ is coming. You know, recently I've been reading the books of Narnia. You guys know the books of Narnia, the C.S. Lewis, there's like 7 books. I'll tell you how I got mine. I've been wanting to read something for my boys at night, and I went to, bookstore. It was like $70. I'm not paying $70, but I went to a place called Costco and I saw a special for $16. I said, I'm all over this deal. And so I said, this is kind of dated language. It's kind of old-fashioned. And I don't know if my boys today in modern Southern California are going to read. Man, they love this thing. They beg me every night to read at least 3 chapters. I say 1 chapter, then we negotiate. We do a chapter and a half, sometimes 2. And this story is just crossing over. We read the first book, which was kind of like a prequel, where it talks about how Narnia was formed, and there's this lion who represents Jesus Christ in our world, but in the world of Narnia, this lion was singing and roaring, and trees and creatures and centaurs and fawns and unicorns and forests are just forming all over, right, and mountains. Anyways, it's exciting, and the kids are loving it. And then in the second book, called Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, we find that there was a witch that was let loose in that first book, who comes back, and the whole land of Narnia, which was sunny and wonderful, is now a winter. It's a chill. It is ice all over. There's icicles, and it's like secret police everywhere. Some of the trees are like secretly telling the witch, hey, there was certain people, and so like people can't even, the creatures of Narnia can't even be open because they're feeling suppression. That if the queen found out, the wicked queen, then they would be turned into stone. That was punishment for treason. But anyways, in that series of oppression, there's this story of the 4 brothers and sisters that there was a prophecy that they would come back. Anyways, I don't want to go too much into prophecy because it's still a book of fiction. And C.S. Lewis said, look, read it as a book of fiction. But it was really quite clear that there are seasons that are just winter. And for some people, they never get to Christmas. See, with the curse that the Ice Queen in the Book of Narnia, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe brought to the world was suspicion and a desire for power and power over everybody and absolute power, and it just created a chill in the whole world of Narnia. And it took, right now I'm not going to tell you the rest of the story. You might have forgotten. I need to go back and read the book or look at the cliff notes. But the point being is that there are seasons when we can experience a winter that never gets to Christmas. But we need to be reminded that we are called not to be passive, but we are called to look at the possibilities that demand us that we act in the face of injustice. Because these young children in the beginning, they're all saying, not us. We can't do anything. We can't fight the witch. We can't do this. We can't do that. We're too young. We're this and that. But we can't be making excuses. When we see the need, when we see the hurt, when we see the darkness around us, our job as Christians, as followers of Christ, is to keep alert and be aware that Christ is coming. But this also reminds us that Christ is already here. You see, Christ is already here. Christ is already working if we'll look around us. And that summons what we call audacious hope. Because there's this phenomenon in society, and it happens in churches, it happens in families, that sometimes you don't want to be that nail that sticks up, right? Because what happens if you're the nail that sticks up, that speaks up? You get hammered down, right? And so nobody likes to get hammered down after, but the fact of the matter is there are times when you hear things, you see things, you experience things, you see someone suffering, you see some, a tax cut that seems unfair to the vast majority of people, you say, I'm not going to just keep quiet, I got to say something, I'm not going to get involved. And sometimes we have to summon that audacious hope, that in the midst of just hopelessness, that we're called to hope because Christ is already here. I remember when I was in Rockville, Illinois, there was a young couple that had a daughter, their second daughter had leukemia, and she was a little child, and having leukemia, they put her through chemo, they put her all these treatments. I mean, these treatments created so much pain, the child was in agony. And I remember there were some of the Shriners that were members of our church that would drive them to the hospital in Chicago. And it was just heart-wrenching, but we all prayed for the child. And the mom said, I know it's not God that wants my child to be sick, but this is the world we live in, and these sicknesses happen. And she was grateful for the prayers, but yet, about a month later, they found that the leukemia had come back, and it was even stronger. And her heart was just tearing out, because this is her child. Imagine your child. After putting the child through torture for that first thing, they say that they had to put it through another round of chemo, and then they were going to do a bone marrow transplant. And it's this whole process, and it's interesting, it's called breaking. They got to break the child because they got to break the immune system to be able to restart the immune system. And so this child was living in pain for months and months in the hospital. But fortunately, they were able to find a bone marrow donor. And through that bone marrow donation, the child was able to come back. But in that meantime, they needed hope. And the hope came in a strange way by an African gentleman who was working at the hospital to clean the rooms. And he would come every day at 4 o'clock, and he would greet the family, and as they got to know each other, they began to realize that they were all Christians. They would pray with one another, and they found out about his history back in Africa and how he came to the United States, his hope for his children, his hope for his family, his hope, that he didn't plan to work at that as an orderly for the rest of his life, but he was able to share life and hope and prayer. And the mom said that during those months at the hospital, when things just seemed really, really bad, they had this hope because they knew that Christ was coming in the form of the gentleman who was from Africa, who was going to come and spend some time and be a sign of God's hope of Jesus Christ with us. It's often very interesting is that sometimes it's in those little things in life, those little interactions, those little graces that we get to see. Is God there? God, are you there? It's so painful. But yet it's in those moments that if we are open and slowing ourselves down, we see that God's love, God's power, God has sent the angels, just like the scriptures say. They're all around us, breaking forth and helping us through our pain, dividing it and helping us to dissipate it, and reminding us to point to God. I was reminded in an LA Times article this morning, I was reading that there is one particular public school in the Los Angeles School District that has the most number of homeless children. It's called Telfair Elementary School. And this is a school where there are a lot of kids who are constantly living without homes. They're living in garages, they're living on the street, they're living in cars, they're living in vans. And you would think this is a situation of hopelessness. But at the same time, the story talks about how the principal had been in that very situation and had fortunately, by God's grace, by God's grace, that from homelessness, he was able to, get himself to the Marines. He was a devout Catholic, and through his faith, and through the military, and through hard work, and through God's grace making a way, he was able to become a principal of an elementary school. That elementary school also produced 3 state legislators. One U.S. congressman, and the new Secretary of State, Alex Padilla, maybe not new, Alex Padilla, Secretary of State, and a assemblywoman. So it's interesting. And this principal was saying, and several of the teachers were saying, the ones that came out of the school when they were living in that same type of hopelessness and poverty, he said that there were adults in the community. Maybe it was a coach, maybe it was a music teacher, maybe it was one teacher who took interest in them, and they became surrogate parents, surrogate fathers when there weren't a father around. And hope began welling up in lives and children could have some hope that when they got out of that situation, we're able to go to school and to better themselves. You know, we're not going to say that this is going to solve all the world's problems, but if individuals like ourselves, Christians, followers of Christ, become ready to summon audacious hope and realize that Christ is here with us, then we can go out into the world and bring in hope. You know, NPC this year survived a lot. You guys may not even know this, but I'm on a session, and so I know these things. We had, do you remember a little while back this year, we had that beam out there was open, and it had, you know, like a big glorified garbage liner up around it. It was an eyesore for a long time. But by God's grace, we were able to pay for that thing, and then they find a contractor that would finally do that. It took us 2 years, but we finally got that thing repaired. You know, we had like at least 2, but maybe even 3 pipes that broke underneath the ground, and as this church is getting older, but yet the money was there, the will was there, and things got repaired. And so we continue to do our ministry. I thank God because God is continuing, Jesus is continuing to help us to survive. You know, there's so many good things happening in church. I was just thinking to myself, this week I know we ran out of these, but this week we have our updated, we even updated this because now we have a staff page. So if you don't have we're able to get a copy of our directory, here it is. But, you know, I just give thanks for our staff. You know, we got our new church secretary from a couple months back, Mary Flores. I've been trying to get this thing done like for 2.5 years. It's got done now, okay? So I'm just thanking God for the little things. Because all these little things, when they come to fruition, are signs of God's grace. Jesus Christ is here with us. Yeah, you know, there's still darkness in our society. There's still people being sold into slavery in our streets. It's called human trafficking. There's drug issues, opioid issues. There's people who are struggling with depression and anger, and there's gun violence, and there's all sorts of things out there that can bring us down. But yet in the midst of all of that, we also know that there is a great light that shines in this world, a light that brings us hope, a light that calls us into the light so we may be able to transform the world and summon audacious hope in ourselves and for others in Jesus Christ. Join me in